Hello, I'm Richard Walker, Director of GCC Law Media, the world's first public relations company specialised in the promotion of international justice. We're hired by human rights organisations and international lawyers to get their causes and cases heard by a wider public. We also organise training for academics on how justice in The Hague works, as we have today in partnership with the Peace Palace of The Hague, on questions that lead to a deeper impact of the court's essential work. Today's debate asks, is the media doing the world justice?
Well, I hope that people involved in the justice sector will be aware of the very important role that the media play and should play. And if I look at my own country, I sometimes feel that our media could do more and not just jump on each and every incident, but more try to cover it in a wider context, which would do justice to the name of the city as a city of peace and justice.
Hallo, Stefan van Amsterdam. Ik mag straks wat zeggen.
Before we start, first I'll introduce myself. A lot of you will know me. I've been around The Hague for quite a few years, since around 2000. As a BBC correspondent, I was covering the courts as well as general politics and current affairs. But before we move on, I would just like to say that we're going to have a few words from Stefan van Hoogstraten on behalf of the Peace Palace, because GCC Law Media is organising this event with the Peace Palace under the umbrella of the Peace Palace Centennial celebrations.
The essential celebration is on 28 August, because that is on the dot 100 years after the opening of the Peace Palace in 1913. Now, on the media, I think the main point I would like to make is that I find it striking that so little attention about international justice is in the Dutch newspapers. This is a difficulty for us that we seem unable to overcome. Well, these words are just an introduction to your debate, so let me leave it at that. You have important speakers.
Let's examine the first question. What's so important about getting The Hague's work on international justice to a wider public? In any case, The Hague is the international city of peace and justice. So in terms of the ensemble of courts, why do you think this is so important?
Presidents, prime ministers, warlords, private soldiers all need to know that they can be held to account for violating international humanitarian law. That is the most important message that the media can help us get out.
But also we need to think about cost. These tribunals cost millions of euros. These trials are really lengthy and expensive. It's really important for us to keep track of how this money is being spent, what is being done, what are the prosecutorial strategies, why the prosecutor chooses this case or that case. I think it's really important that there is some accountability so that we can observe these courts and tell the public what is going on in The Hague, often very far away from the places where the crimes occurred.
Thank you. Let's look at, when it comes to this topic, when and what do the media cover?
The press will show up on an interesting trial for the prosecution's opening and for the verdict, and virtually nothing will happen in between unless you call Naomi Campbell.
Absolutely right. When it comes to coverage, the Kenyan, what I saw is that when there's big days in the Kenyan upcoming trials, a lot of Kenyan media are coming. I hardly ever see any Congolese, although most trials have been at ICC about Congolese. So they're not coming, they don't have the money, they don't have the ways to get to The Hague, which is, I think, a shame.
The children whose limbs had been hacked off in Sierra Leone were not covered by the international media. Naomi Campbell and a diamond were. That says it all about the focus of the people who own the media, I'm afraid.
What do you think the press really should do for the media?
Sometimes I really have to read 3 times the headline, so what does this mean? I think headlining could be done a little bit better.
That sense, I think it's really difficult to say, oh, they should make their press releases more sexy, because the legal language that is used in the courtroom, especially in procedural things that sometimes happen, I don't think they can make it much more sexy.
Well, that means a bit more work for the journalists then, doesn't it?
That's true,
Richard?
books and some cases.
Yeah, press releases will never be really juicy.
No, it doesn't need to be sexy, but it needs to be clear, at least.
Exactly.
I mean, a little bit of more clarity. I mean, and it goes wrong.
To me, it doesn't matter quite so much. I mean, I know you're going to get upset if they say the ICJ when it isn't the ICJ, but as long as the story gets out there, I don't mind if they get the initials wrong, as long as the lesson gets across. That's the biggest problem.
And we should just also try to see maybe with universities that train these journalists. I studied in Croatia, I studied journalism. I didn't learn anything about covering the trials, but I think specialized courses at universities, I think might be a good way to go to prepare these people to at least know the basics before they start being journalists.
We do face a major difficulty in getting the message across that international justice has got to be seen to have fairness and equality as its goal.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
Thomas, he's a colleague who's been covering for a much longer time international tribunals and courts. Yesterday we were discussing about how to get African journalists to the Netherlands. So maybe we can think about that in a broader setting. I don't know. I think it's really, really important that people from Congo can come.
Yeah, but who's going to pay for it? Any ideas, any
I don't
suggestions?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of money still.
If I may add, in the case of the former Yugoslavia, there are several NGOs, the OSCE, I think, participated as well. There are funds. I think the NGO Document, I think, is bringing now a group of activists and journalists. So at the ICTY, it's a fairly common occurrence that journalists come. I'm pretty sure the ICC can figure something out. Yeah,
An
because
international fund, maybe?
Yeah, and I'm sure international organizations would be maybe open to funding something like that.
Thank you very much indeed. Questions from the floor? Yes. Pam Eva Huis.
Ultimate message has to come across to the target audiences of the media. Then you have to think who is interested. You have to educate journalists. But my basic message is, who is responsible of getting the message across? That are the institutions.
It's not fair to say that the institutions are doing an awful job. But as far as getting the message across, today a lot of us are online. There's a lot of independent blogging, independent commentary. So I think we don't necessarily need to only look at the quote-unquote traditional media. There can also be other people that are not necessarily belonging to a particular media organization, but can also provide some information to the public, which was what we're discussing here. So I think we don't necessarily need to look only at, the narrow space of large media operations.
We have heard lots of journalists bashing here during this discussion, and people are right to criticize what is going on. But unfortunately, it's not due to bad intentions of individual journalists. I would love to go to national courts more often, but it's due to the commercial aspect which has been introduced into the way in which media work.
But you're still allowed to go for the highlights. Allowed to go. Yes. Right. Okay.
We live in an era where you have YouTube, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, so things move very quickly. Which brings me to international justice, which doesn't. You hear these stories so often that when somebody like Naomi Campbell comes by, it immediately piques the interest of most of the people around the world because it's a well-known person. Unfortunately, and it's with no disrespect intended towards the victims of these horrible crimes, but that is the unfortunate reality. So, rather than seeing Naomi Campbell as a hindrance, we should see her as an asset.
So we've put our heads together. It has never been universally agreed. It's just very tentative first attempt of what does international justice actually mean. International justice requires that there be no impunity for genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, or the crime of aggression. Full respect for human rights demands that all individuals, private citizen and soldier, president and prime minister, must be held to account for planning, preparing, initiating and executing violations of international justice. So that's as far as we've got. We want it to be a collective effort to formulate shape and coin this definition. We want the input from the international community. It will be online, it will be developed, and we're all open to suggestions and proposed tweaks. To everybody, I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. It's been much fun and very, very informative. And we hope to see you all again back here or at another nearby venue in the near future. Thank you.